In this video, we'll go through how to build sauna benches step by step. I'm Anton, a Finnish sauna enthusiast. I've helped thousands of people and businesses design saunas that actually work as they should. When designing a sauna, one of the most important structural elements is the bench system. Done well, it makes a difference between a lukewarm room and a true Finnish sauna. We're going to go through some guidelines. There's not a definite one way to do it, but this will help you build durable, comfortable benches that respect the sauna physics and the Finnish sauna wisdom. 3 levels: step, foot bench, and sitting bench. What a well-designed sauna bench configuration usually has is 3 different levels. First, you have the sitting bench, which you might call the top bench, and this is where you most of the time sit down or lie down. Then there's the foot bench, which you might think of as the middle level. This is where your feet rest, ideally above the stones of the heater, but sometimes you can even go down and sit on that lower level. And then there's a step or a platform on the floor, which gives you easy access to the foot bench and the sitting bench. In compact saunas, the bottom step is often made as a freestanding movable bench, which can be slid aside during cleaning. In larger saunas, it may be built permanently so you can't move it around. The key practical point is that you want to raise your feet above the heater surface when possible. This aligns with what is sometimes called as the law of Löyly. That means basically that your body is in a zone of more balanced heat from head to toe, rather than suffering a cold zone near the floor. Bench height levels should be considered relative to the heater, following the logic of Löyly law. When using heaters with an open mesh design, so basically the exposed stones all around, the strictness of needing feet fully above the stones relaxes a little because the radiant heat and convection distributes more laterally, so the principle still helps reduce temperature stratification. Why elevated benches? Heat rises, and within the sauna, the air stratifies. The lowest levels are comparatively cooler, while the hotter air accumulates a lot higher. If your feet are too low, they sit in what's called a cold zone, and then you can feel discomfort or a strong temperature gradient from your feet to head. By elevating that foot bench above or close to the top of the heater stones, you can position your entire body within the main uniform heat zone, the Löyly pocket. And this reduces head-to-toe temperature difference, making your experience more even and comfortable. Also, when you place your feet above the heater, you help avoid excessive radiant heat hitting your feet or legs directly. The goal is to have more convective, enveloping heat rather than sharp radiant hotspots. However, in real life, many saunas balance priorities: space, ceiling height, and the heater type. So while the ideal is to have feet above the stones, many implementations settle for close to rather than far below, so long as ventilation and bench gaps are good. We'll talk more about those gaps later on. Bench layouts and shapes. There's a few common bench configurations used in Finnish saunas. First, there's an I bench. It's a simple bench running along the one wall, usually the back wall of the sauna. Then you have the L bench. This is a bench forming like an L shape, usually on the back wall and then one of the side walls. And then you have a U bench, which is basically the bench on all 3 walls except the front wall, forming a letter U. Then there's a double I bench system, so basically parallel benches on opposite walls so you can have a nice conversation with each other. There's many things to think about when you're choosing which layout to go for. It depends on space, whether there's a sloped or a flat ceiling, heater location, and how many people you plan to sit in there. U-shapes allow more flexibility when you're sharing the best heat zones. L or I layouts are simpler and often more economical. Starting out with the I bench, so that's basically usually running just on the back wall of the sauna. So as you can see here, we just have the I bench running here on the back wall, and so basically here's the heater. Door will be somewhere here, where the picture is taken from. And yeah, this is basically what you see in 99% of any Finnish sauna in apartments, for example. And this is basically what I have, is something like this. Then moving on to the L bench. So the L bench will be looking like this. So you see, it's a lot more space to sit people there, and it's a more, I would say, kind of conversation-friendly space rather than just the I bench, you know, both of you looking at the heater or the wall. Here you can kind of see each other when you're on the both 2 sides of the walls. So basically how it works is, this is the back wall here, and then this is one side wall. So the L bench just runs on one back wall and one side wall of your choice, of course. And here we have the heater in the middle, and the door would be here where the picture is taken from. I also want to quickly show you how many people you can actually fit on this L bench right here. This is our Löyly sauna. And so basically how crazy it is you can fit that many people in there. I think it's like closer to 20 people. But I mean, you wouldn't want to be somewhere really here, right next to the heater on the floor, because of course it won't be that hot as up here. But I mean, you get the point that you can still have 2 rows of benches here, and you can still be in a nice heat zone. But yeah, I mean, it's probably not something everyone does, but I just wanted to show you it's pretty funny how many you can actually fit. Then you have the U bench. So basically it means just that all the benches are on 3 walls of the sauna. So usually the front face, there's no bench. And then you have both side walls and the back wall with the bench. And what that looks like is something like this one here. So you can see people here, all on this. Let's make this red so you can see it a bit more. So all over here you can see people. And then the front face, which is right kind of where the picture's taken from, that's where there's nothing. There could be like a glass front, for example, or just a wooden wall with a heater. But yeah, this is very common in larger saunas, usually like commercial spaces. You could do this. Then last but not least, we have the double eye bench. So basically 2 benches running on both side walls. So to get an example, it's something like this. So here, 1 bench here, 1 bench here, doors here. And the heater in this case would be, for example, it could be here in this corner here where you can't see it, or this corner. Or then if you really wanted to, if this was a little bit wider, you could definitely put it like inside the bench, like here, like embedded into the bench. Why I say you need it wider, just because if you're gonna be sitting here, you don't wanna be, you know, sitting with your legs right on the heater. You'll burn yourself. So that's just the one thing why you wanna have a little bit more space if you do wanna embed that heater in the bench, sorry. It just really comes down to your specific space. So if you have like a flat ceiling or a sloped ceiling, that will depend on where you want to put the benches, because you don't want to have a bench at the bottom end of the slope. You want to have it at the top edge. And with the flat ceiling, of course, you don't have that choice. You just put it wherever you want. It doesn't really matter. The same experience is everywhere. And also one more thing, of course, to consider is how many people you want to fit in the sauna. Of course, the bench layout will affect it, but mostly, of course, how much space you have in the sauna in the first place. Because if you don't have much space, you can't really do an U-shaped bench or an L-shaped bench where you get more bench seating for more people. Usually the L or I-shaped benches in the sauna are the most economical and also the most simple to do. And I would, if I could choose, I would probably go for an L-shape bench, or double I is always nice. So you can talk with people. Alrighty, let's move on to the next section. Dimensions, depths, heights, and clearances. When designing sauna benches, the dimensions must balance comfort, ergonomics, and the natural behavior of the heat inside the sauna. That top sitting bench should have enough depth to allow a person to sit comfortably and also, if possible, to lie down. A minimum depth of about 24 inches works well for seated use, while extending the bench to around 40 inches makes it possible to lie down fully stretched. The height difference between the top bench and the foot bench is typically around 18 inches. This step is comfortable for climbing and it helps position the feet closer to the warmer air zone. The distance you want to have from the top bench to the ceiling is another key measurement. Ideally, that seating bench should be positioned about 40 to 47 inches below the ceiling. If the gap's too small, then you'll feel that the space is really cramped and overheated, but if it's too large, then you miss out on the best löyly, the even and enveloping heat pocket of the top of the room. Equally important is the relationship of the foot bench to the sauna heater stones. You want to place that foot bench roughly around 4 to 8 inches above the level of the stones. This ensures that the feet aren't left in a cooler air zone near the floor, but instead rest with the same warm layer of air as the rest of your body. Okay, so let's go next through some bench heights a little bit, from the ceiling to the top bench to the foot bench and to the support bench, or the step bench basically. So this is the side view it's gonna be. So here we're gonna have, let's say the top bench is here. So I have floating benches. In my sauna, there's no support frame underneath for a freestanding bench. And then we have, here is gonna be second bench. Then here would be the platform, how I get on those benches. So this, you wanna have 47, max 47 inches. So usually it's around 40 to 47. Let's say it's 47 in this case. Then move on to this height. The height from the top bench to the foot bench, usually I would say around 15 to 17 inches is pretty common. So somewhere there you want to be if you can. Of course, the sauna heater is going to be somewhere here, so you want to kind of make it that this is almost at the upper edge at least, or then above it is the best. But if you have good air circulation in the sauna, you can be a little bit below it and you won't really notice the difference. But of course, the higher the better. And also you want to be in this heat pocket here. So basically how it works with the heat stratification is there's 3 parts to the sauna. So there's the low part, this is the cold zone. That's the cold zone. Then you have the middle one, it's kind of warm. You won't really notice the difference when your feet are there if it's properly elevated above the sauna heater. And then you have the hot zone. So this is where you feel the most heat. So these 2 zones is somewhere you want to be in, completely, fully your body. So your feet aren't on the floor here, but they are on this section of your whole body. So your upper body could be here, and then your feet are there. Then you'll definitely be loving the sauna. So yeah, that's how it looks like in my sauna. These heights here, of course, you can work with. You can make it a little different. It's not exact. Remember, these are just guidelines of what I have. But yeah, don't think of these measurements as absolute rules, but rather as time-tested guidelines. Since each sauna varies in ceiling height, heater design, and available floor space, the final placement of benches should always be adjusted to fit the specific room. Thoughtful attention to these proportions creates a sauna where the heat feels even from your head to toe, and experience is both relaxing and authentic. Let me make you an example of how to design a bench layout for your sauna. So I'm going to be showing you exactly what my sauna is like. and what the bench layout looks like. So let's go through the dimensions, what I've been working with for the last couple of years at least. So what I have is just a single eye bench on the back wall of the sauna. So let's do that first. So then we have the back wall here. Let's do something like here. It's not perfectly done, but you'll get the idea. So this back bench here, it's gonna be around 6 foot wide. So 6 foot, oh yeah, I forgot to say already, the dimensions of my sauna of course matter in this case. So 6 foot will be here. So what's that? It's around 72 inches wide, and the depth of my sauna is gonna be, let's make here a clear line, that, and then the depth of the sauna I have is around 5 feet. So that's around what, 60 inches? 60 inches deep and 72 inches wide. I like to work with inches just because the bench depth is usually done with inches because it's a lot, you can't really use foot with that. You want to be exact. So here we have a 6 foot bench wide. Of course, it's not exactly 6, it'll be a little bit less, so it fits actually in the sauna. If it was 6 foot, it would just hit the walls and you couldn't even get in there. You want to have little air gaps there. And the depth of my top bench is going to be 24 inches. So there, 24 inches. And then let's put here 72 in. It's around that. Doesn't really matter. You usually it's from wall to wall, so the exact bench width doesn't really matter in this case, just because the room is already 6 foot. So we have a 24-inch top bench. Oh yeah, one more thing before I say, my whole sauna's height, that's gonna be, I would say, a bit over 7 inches. I would say exactly, it's maybe 87 inches. It's right somewhere there is the height of my sauna. Then moving on to the foot bench or lower second bench. And the depth of this one is going to be 16 inches. And that's enough space to put your feet there. I never sit on the second tier of my sauna bench just because it's never that hot there. And if I feel really hot, I just get out of the sauna and then I go back. I don't like to kind of, linger around in there. I just get out and go back in on the top bench always and throw water on the stones depending on how hot I want it or how hot I want it to feel. So that's going to be going all along the sauna like the top bench. Door, one might be wondering where that is. Door is going to be pretty much somewhere here is the door. Then the sauna heater, how that looks like is, well, it's a bit out of proportion. This drawing is not really exact, but sauna is going to be here basically. And what I have done is I have like a wooden rail going like that and like that on the side of the sauna. So this rail here you see is going to be up high, so I can put my feet a lot higher from the foot bench. So I would say the height of that rail is pretty much the same as the top bench. So I can kind of, put my feet like it would be on the bench, but the bench of course doesn't extend that far. Just the option for that, I think it's nice. You can elevate your feet. And then on the side, of course here, this will also be the same level as the top bench. Then how to get onto the top bench and the second bench, I have here a movable platform. This movable platform is going to be 16 inches deep, and then the width of it is going to be 28 inches. So that's definitely more than enough kind of, to step on that and then go on the second tier and the top bench. This is completely movable. It's kind of like a little chair without a backrest. So I can move it around, it has its own legs. I can take it out of the sauna if I want it, or I can put it more under the second bench. It fits under there, it's not that high. So you can go under it there, I can move it around for cleaning and etc. So it makes it really easy. And there's not much space in front of the sauna. But since this movable step goes a little bit under the benches, that gives you more space when you get in the sauna. But usually when I open the door, I'm pretty much straight away on that movable platform just to get up in the sauna. Because you don't want to be, I don't know who stands around in the sauna too much. It's a bit weird. So how many people does my sauna really fit? I would say, depending on the size of the people, like this one, if it was like my sized people, I'm like 6'2". So I would say if there was 3 of me, it would be very comfortable. 4, I can fit. 4 is pretty snug. But I think 3 is the most comfy. 2, of course, is the nicest. You can kind of stretch out. There's enough space to kind of stretch out. If you want to lie down, it's just going to be you in there then. I mean, you won't be still able to fully extend, but it's very close. I usually put my legs up on the wall a little bit if I'm alone in the sauna, if I want to lie down the top bench. And then always, of course, when you design the sauna, remember to look into what heater you're going to have in there, because every heater has different safety dimensions, safety distances, I mean. So here, for example, I have the rail. This rail here is going to be above the heater, or a little bit like above it on the side, so it doesn't really matter there. But right directly next to the heater, you want to have the safety distance that they recommend. So for example, it could be 2 inches, 4 inches, 6, 8 inches, whatever it is. So the space between here and here on the sides, you want to have whatever that distance is. So just remember when you design the bench layout to take that into consideration also, because you don't want to end up getting a sauna heater doesn't fit physically, or it's too close to some combustible materials and you're wondering, oh, why is my wood starting to darken, or it could even catch fire if it's too close. So it's definitely a big safety hazard if you don't go with the manual. So remember that. Alrighty, let's move on to the next section. Different types of benches. There's 3 ways of building the bench supports: wall-mounted frame, freestanding, or raised floor benching. In smaller saunas, benches are often wall-mounted to leave the floor area clear, and in larger ones, floor-supported benches with legs are feasible and sometimes more stable. In many larger public saunas, the benches are actually built with a raised floor right beneath the wooden seating area. The good side of doing a raised floor is that you have less cubic footage to heat up in your sauna and no need to clean the empty space under the benches. The one bad side to that is that there's no air circulation going through those benches to help with more even temperatures. So basically there's 3 different ways you can do the bench supports. One way is either you have it wall mounted, then you have the freestanding support, so it's on the floor to the bench. And then lastly, you can do like a raised floor structure. I'll show you right here what that kind of looks like. So this is just a side view kind of image of the inside of the sauna. So what you can see here is basically you have one bench here, then you could have one bench here, and then the door would be, for example, could be here. So this kind of benching floating on the wall like this. So this back bench here, the top bench, that will be attached to the back wall also, as well as the side walls, which the side wall will be basically like here. And then you have the foot bench, which that's gonna be just supported on the wall only, not the back wall, just the side walls. And that's what a wall-mounted frame basically looks like. Then moving on to freestanding benches, what that basically is that we have the same benches here like this we could have, but then we have legs going from here, or like this, for example, going to the ground. And then we could have another bench like here, like this, with legs also. So basically everything's with legs. There's nothing attached to the walls here or on the side walls. Everything is just on the floor, supported by the support beams from the bench to the floor. The one bad thing with these freestanding benches is basically the cleaning side of things. So when you have the wall-mounted frame, like we just went through, mounts on the walls, so you have really empty space kind of under the benches. So it's really easy to clean. There's nothing in front of you. But when you go to the freestanding benches, you have those support beams in the way of the cleaning. So there could be many kind of poles in front of you when you're trying to clean the floor, for example. And lastly, then there's the raised floor option, which is usually seen like in public or larger saunas. What that looks like basically is going to be, you have the floor here like this, but when the benches come, the floor is done like that for the first bench, and then for the second bench, top bench, I mean, it's going to be like that. So there's no empty, this is not empty space at all. So it's just basically tiled up, could be, for example, completely waterproof floor. It's just made in steps, the floor kind of. So then you just on top of this, you would have kind of the bench, the wooden bit would be on top of this. So that just makes kind of course, heating up the space should be a little bit quicker because there's less cubic footage to heat up, but then also cleaning it is easier because there's no floor to clean up. Of course, in this case, the bad thing is that you don't have any air circulation going through the benches because there's no space under the benches to go through. So that means kind of a little bit uneven temperatures maybe, but a lot with that helps, of course, proper ventilation. But that's one thing to keep in mind. Alrighty, let's move on to the next section, making the benches. Let's move on to how the bench construction works and how the removable wood decking is fit onto the frame of the bench so you can clean the sauna easily. So here's a couple examples on how the removable bench layout looks like. So here you have 4 examples. So it could look a little bit confusing first, but let's go through it. So what we have here is this. This is going to be these big black blocks. What I mean, basically, sorry, what I meant is big black wooden frame. Sorry, no, not big black wooden frame. Why is it big? So then we have these black rectangles here. They're basically the wooden frame. And then these illustrate the wooden benching you're basically sitting on. And these are removable in all these 4 examples. So let's go through how it works. So the first one here is basically with no fascia board. So here you can see in the second example, there's a little board here in front of the support frame. So that's something you won't see here. And this is one way you can do it. You don't need it necessarily, but you can, if you want to put it there, you can. So this whole thing, this whole piece just kind of just lifts off. It slots onto between the frames, so it can't really move. Of course, if you push it, it will move a little bit, but when you're sitting on it using every day, it doesn't move, and it's just easy because you can take it off for cleaning then. So this is very simple. So this is with the boards basically running parallel to your back wall, because these is usually, for example, imagine like a sauna with one I-shaped bench on the back wall. So these would be the boards running with the width of the sauna, and below here you can see this is with the depth of the sauna. So the other way, so if the sauna would be like this, running like this would be the back wall. So the bench planks basically will be running the same as the wall. But then when you go to this bottom one here, that means basically you have the back wall like this, it will be going like this, the wooden planks. Just kind of give you an idea. It's a little bit unclear here, but yeah. So the second example here we had, like I mentioned, has the fascia board. It's exactly the same as this first one. Number 1 here and number 2. So it's basically exactly the same. It just has that board in the front and kind of hiding the frame. If you want to do that, it's an option. And then we move on to these perpendicular wooden decking. So So this would basically mean that the planking runs parallel to the side walls of the sauna, not the back wall, if your bench is on the back wall, basically. So here you need one fascia board in front of it, just to kind of cover it up. It's usually common with this kind of setup. And then of course, a fascia board won't be attached to this wood planking or decking, so it's removable easy. Then we have another option here. This is what I have in my sauna. So I have both 2 fascia boards on the front and the back, so it really just slots in there, doesn't move at all. Because this one can move a little bit more backwards, unless it's right on the wall. But you can do either one works. There's basically no right or wrong in this. This is just how my sauna is done. So it's up to you which one you go for one of these. I personally like this, of course I have it. But if I could choose, I'd probably go for something like this if you want to go the other way. Because I like to cover maybe the fascia board. It looks maybe a little bit better. Just hides a little bit that maybe rougher wood could be underneath for the support frame, so yeah. To be able to mount the wall-mounted benches, you need something that's behind the wood paneling supporting the weight of the people sitting on that floating bench. That's called blocking. Blocking is responsible for bringing that extra strength, and what that means is that you want to leave a horizontal support beams between the vertical studs in your wall in the correct places where you plan to connect the benches to. When you have the blocking in place, to connect to that support, you'll need to drill through the interior paneling and the furring strips and use long enough and thick enough screws. Bench frame. A good wood profile for a bench frame is something like a 2x4. You want to create whatever size rectangle you have decided in your sauna. For example, the bench could be 6 foot wide and maybe 24 inches deep. Inside that rectangle, you want to have pieces running vertically that support the frame. These pieces should be max 2 foot apart from each other. So let's move on to the wooden frame that all of that bench cladding goes onto. So here you can see we have, let's say for example, a 6 foot wide bench. So this would be just the same width as the back wall of your sauna. I'm just going for the basic I-shaped bench on the back wall of the sauna. It's the easiest to explain. So this bench should be the same width as the back wall of your sauna, obviously. Little couple inches from the edges shorter, of course, so it fits, because you will have the wood paneling there. You don't want to be touching exactly. There will be a little bit of a gap can be there, and you can use wooden spacers to fill in that gap when you're going to be mounting it to the side walls. What's most commonly used is like something like a 2x4 wood framing, and you can just run it rectangular. As you see here, it's going boom, boom, boom. Very simple. Then when you're kind of connecting them together, you'll notice it's not really stable. So you want to add these beams in the middle of it just to create extra stability, and it can handle the weight. So for example, if you're running wood beams or wood planking like this, the same parallel to the back wall, then you'll want to definitely support it with these beams here like that. But of course, if you do run it like this, for example, you still want to have a couple there at least. You don't necessarily have to have as many, because it is running the different way like this, but it's still good to, of course, have more than enough rather than too little bit, and you notice you'll just drop through the bench and you'll be on the floor like, what the hell happened? These middle pieces here too, you want to have them around, I would say, max 2 feet apart from each other if you're going to be running benches like this, just so there is that extra support there. And the wood beams, the wood planking on top is thick, but it won't be thick enough to only have one, because you will notice it bending if there's more than 2 feet there. You want to use butt joints and wood screws to fix these pieces together in the frame. To avoid splitting the wood and getting the screws deep enough, you want to do pilot holes and suitable countersinks. Decking. After we've done the frame, the first thing we do is securing the possible fascia board to the front of the frame to create a clean look. Before we start fixing the decking on top of the frame, you'll need to measure the exact width of the wood planks you have, since this will determine the gap between the planks. This gap between the planks should be around 1/2 inch or less, and the idea is to be large enough for air to go through, but small enough to avoid any fingers or toes getting stuck in between. It's good to avoid going as big of a gap like 1 inch, then you'll just most likely get something stuck in between them, and you don't want to know how it feels like. If it looks like you'll have a gap closer to 1 inch rather than 1/2 inch, you can raise the fascia board from the front to the same level as the benches, so it takes away some distance on each bench gap. If you're gonna have 2 small gaps, then you can just go over the edges of the frame a little bit. Fixing to the wall. Now that we're ready with the decking, let's move on to fixing that top bench to the walls. The main load-bearing support will be on the side walls, and the secondary being on the furring strips behind the back wall paneling. It's good to have a small gap between the back wall and the bench frame using wooden spacers. The gap should be around, I would say, 1 inch to a maximum 4 inches. This gap will help a lot with air circulation and also help reduce vertical temperature differences, which you might know as heat stratification. You might be thinking you're losing space when you do the gap, but really it doesn't get any deeper with the backrest, since we'll be installing that later on, and that backrest will be coming out of the wall just a little bit as well, so the same bench depth will remain. Moving on. Then we'll attach the top bench by using the screws to penetrate through the bench's frame to the sauna frame and the sidewall paneling. You want to make sure that those screws are at least 3 inches long, depending on, of course, the panel thickness you're working with. Installing the foot bench is basically the same as the top bench we're working with now, but being removable. So the main difference is that we won't attach it to the back wall of the sauna, just the sides. How the foot bench will stay in place is that there's fascia boards on the front and back of the bench, keeping it on the side mounts. You might be interested in seeing what that really looks like in real life. So let's have a look at that in my own sauna. Okay, so just so you get an idea of my sauna, basically, well, the window's open, don't mind that. It's just open because the sauna was just on, so it's a bit warm in here. So basically, you see, here's the benches, and you see they're floating, there's nothing underneath. So how that works basically is that this whole thing comes off. So I'll remove this in a second and show you, but basically, this comes off, this will stay here, this front fascia board, and then in the back there's also one there kind of holding it. Then the bottom one also is kind of the same, so this one's just here. It will lift off from here. But you can see here, get an idea on the layout, that there's the bottom bench down low, there's a drain also, and then there's the second bench, the top bench, the backrest you see it's pretty high up really, it's not really skinny. And then of course here's a footrest here where you can rest your feet on, and there's the heater. So basically you see it's very basic in a way, nothing special, but it gets the job done. And let's go into the benches themselves, how they come off. Okay, so you get an idea on the bench how it comes off. Here you can see, I was pulling this whole thing lifts up. So I can lift it all the way up. You can see, it's just like that. Very simple, and it's attached to wooden beams, bottom and top. There's a support beam on the bottom frame. You can see the frame there, one screw there, some fat. They're tied together like that. And then here, this way the screws you can see, that's kind of the beams on the walls that goes into the blocking. So these still rest on top of that kind of wall support frame. And then the bench support frame is on that, and then the bench cladding itself is here. So that's kind of very basic, but this is how easy you can clean the sauna then if you need to. So this comes off, clean between the staves, and above it, below it, and yeah. This will come off if I lift it, but it's just easy to show like this. You can also see in the backrest that here you can see it's missing one plug. There's a screw for it, holding it. This is missing, it's still in there, you can't touch it with your skin, but usually these are something you want to have, these wooden caps. So this wooden cap goes basically on top of it, hides it, makes it look cleaner. I've lost that one because these come off pretty easily and accidentally sometimes, so I've lost one over there, but it's fine. And moving on to the second bench. Let me just move this stuff out of the way. Okay, so the second bench, it just comes off the same way as the other one does. I can move it a little bit to the side, maybe here. I'm using one hand. Kind of get an idea. I don't want to drop it. There we go. So, see, it's exactly the same as the top bench, but it just doesn't have anything connected to the back wall. You see, it's a little bit thicker, this back frame here, just so it has the extra support and it can hold the weight of you standing on this. It's not going to be much weight, of course. Only when you're getting up on the top bench, you're going to be basically putting full weight on it. Otherwise, it's just your feet there chilling. You can also sit on it if you want, but yeah. You can see there, same style on the walls into the blocking. But yeah, very simple. Let me get this back on. There we go. That's back there. And then, of course, the foot bench or the riser. It's not really high. You can see there. It's pretty much, I would say, what is that? Like 15 centimeters maybe. Inches, it's around what, 7 inches probably off. Of course, from this bottom bit, it'll be more over here, but just a kind of a suitable step up to the next layer. So you can see gap here a little bit higher then, and then you're sitting up here. So you're pretty much on the upper portion of the sauna. You can see also there's a heater's upper layer of stones. It's basically at the same level as the foot bench is. So you do have those even temperatures everywhere in your body from your head to toe. And one more thing I want to mention, that remember always measuring the distances from the ceiling to the top bench, from the top bench to the foot bench, and then from there you can kind of go from the ground up to meet that point. So anyway, here's my sauna. Very simple, nothing special, but it gets the job done, and I've enjoyed this for a couple of years already and no problems so far, and everything works as it should. Back to the video. Choice of wood for benches. The bench surfaces should be smooth, comfortable to sit on when hot, stable under heat and humidity, and relatively low in resin content. Let's go through a couple of choices we use in Finland. Aspen is really popular in sauna benches. It's light, low density, and pleasant to touch. Then we also use spruce, but the knots may leak resin and get hot, so it's better to avoid it, or then just to put it in places where you're in minimal contact with, like the walls, for example. Then we use a lot of thermally modified woods, you might know as thermowood, or heat-treated alder/ash variants are sometimes used, but they must tolerate the cycling heat and moisture. You can use the same wood species as you did with the paneling, but it should be thicker. The benches should be at least 1 inch thick or more, just so that they're stable. Safety. In sauna bench construction, small mistakes in fasteners, for example, lead to hazards. Let's go through some rules of thumb. You want to use brass, stainless steel, or properly galvanized screws to resist corrosion in the humid and hot sauna environment. Countersink those screw heads or use cover caps or wood plugs so that the surface is flush and smooth. Prefer to drive those screws from the underside or behind the bench, just so it's hidden from the seating surface, to avoid people touching the hot heads and to prevent the water penetration into the exposed holes, which can lead to decay. All structural connections like the supports and joists should be robust. Make sure the benches are solid and don't flex under load. Backrests and lighting. The backrest serves both comfort and practical function. Basically, it protects the wall from the steam and sweat from you and also provides that ergonomic support for a more comfortable sauna session. Where you want to have the backrests is basically everywhere where the benches are, so you don't lean on the walls directly. Where the backrest actually sits above the bench is around 16 inches, and the backrest itself should be around 12 inches high. It'll feel even more comfy if you incline the backrest around 10 to 20 degrees from the top towards the room. The main thing is you just want to have at least some sort of backrest. Even though it's just one plank, it just helps keep the walls clean and just last longer without needing to change the wall paneling. You can also integrate LED lighting behind or under the backrests or under the upper benches, for example, for that ambient indirect lighting. Use fixtures that are rated for high heat, moisture, and conceal wiring carefully. One tip, remember to light the space, not the people. Maintenance and longevity. So you want to keep those sauna benches healthy for a long time. Let's go through a couple of ideas how to do that. First up, with regular cleaning. Every now and then you might want to rinse the sauna benches to get rid of any odors that might appear with time, especially with longer sessions. What I usually do after a longer sauna session with my friends, I just get the shower head from the shower, it's right next to my sauna. I just get that and rinse down the whole sauna, and all the smells usually go away if there was any in the first place. And then the sauna, of course, dries over time. Access. You want to be able to clean the benches from all angles, from the top, below, and between those wood planks. This can be made easy with the modular benches that are removable. Then you want to do some periodic inspection just to check the screws and fasteners if they're loosening, and then just retighten them. Optionally, you can also use some sauna paraffin oil to treat the wood, but many Finns leave the benches completely untreated, letting the wood's hygroscopic properties buffer the humidity. There's just so many ways to design the benches. Any competent carpenter should be able to build around these ideas, and you can definitely add and create all types of different bench shapes and sizes. There's just a couple of main things to keep in mind when doing the benches. First, remember the ventilation between the benches, and then next, you want to have the room easy to clean, and then also remember it should be able to support the weight of the people inside. And then the last thing is, please forget to put the benches measured from the ceiling to the top bench, not from the floor to the top bench, because you don't want to be missing out on that biggest and best loaded pocket, which is up high always. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Sorry what I meant is big black, not big black, big black. What's it big?